To the water sector. I'm joined now by Robbie Moore, who's the Shadow Minister for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. A very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning.
What's your quick headline take on this report?
Well, look, we cautiously welcome the Cunliffe review. A huge amount of detail has gone into it, with 88 recommendations, the key one being bringing all of the regulators together under one single regulator. And the reason we cautiously welcome it is because we don't yet understand or know the detail of what that regulatory framework under one single regulator will look like. And of course, we want to make sure that the investor market is reassured as much as possible, but also making sure that the bill payer is satisfied with the level of service that they would get and water quality improves at the same time.
Do you agree with Sir Jon that Ofwat as a regulator has failed?
Well, I think that if you are relying on regulation to carry out not only enforcement but regulation of those water companies, it has to be robust and it has to have teeth. They have to be as strong as possible, which is why when we were in government, we brought out tougher tougher enforcement powers that regulators could hold, making sure that monitoring was increased from the 7% of water company monitoring that we had back in 2010 to 100% in 2023. So we could make sure that those regulators, whether it was Ofwat or indeed the Environment Agency or the Drinking Water Inspectorate, could hold those water companies and the polluter to account as strongly as possible.
Do you agree that Ofwat has failed there?
Well, I would absolutely say that based on the report that I've had a look at this morning, that there has been failures within the regulatory system. And therefore, it is right that the government of the day make sure that the regulators have got the powers that they needed to do and be able to utilise, which is why when we were in government, we increased those powers and we were advocating as strongly as possible that the regulators should be able to utilise them. So which is why we cautiously welcome bringing all of those regulatory powers, whether they're held by the Environment Agency or Ofwat, or indeed some of those powers being held by Natural England, under one single regulator that can then properly hold all of those water companies to account.
I guess the implication, therefore, if there's been regulatory failures, is that there were failures of the Conservative government not to do this sort of thing sooner.
Well, one of the key things that we need to get on top of was understanding where pollution was happening. I come back to the point that in 2010, only 7% of storm overflows and where sewage was entering our waters, lakes or seas was monitored. We brought that monitoring up to 100% in 2023. We quadrupled the amount of inspections that were able to take place. We made sure that we had that announcement on banning water company bosses' bonuses. We linked dividends to environmental performance. These were all measures that we brought out in 2023. We are now a year into this government. We now have seen a report that's been announced, but what else really has this government done a year into office? And I think the big issue that's being missed today is Steve Reid, on Laura Kuenssberg yesterday, announced that a very lacklustre ambition to reduce sewage pollution by only 50% up until 2030. Now, that's actually weaker than what we announced when we were in government and indeed put in place by £104 billion to reduce sewage pollution. And the Times are reporting that actually Steve Reid's lacklustre approach will result in an additional 20,000 spills over that period of time. We've seen Feargal Sharkey today call for Secretary of State Steve Reid's resignation because he, as a key campaigner on this issue, is not satisfied with what the Labour government have been doing over their 12 months in office so far.
I'm not sure Feargal Sharkey had many complimentary things to say about your government either over the years. Just mention as well that Steve Reid actually made that announcement first on Trevor Phillips yesterday on Sky News before interviewing elsewhere afterwards. So you think it's not ambitious enough in terms of the reduction in sewage pollution by 2030. What about in terms of how these companies are treated? Are you supportive that the gist of this suggests they should be remaining fully in private hands and fully able, in the right circumstances, to make profit and pay dividends to shareholders?
Well, I think having a system which is fully privatised within the water company is something that I strongly advocate, providing that you have a regulatory system that has the enforcement powers, that is utilising those enforcement powers that have been awarded to them by the government of the day, and robustly holding a water company to account. Now, where I do think there has been a slight missed opportunity with the Cunliffe review is actually ruling out any other opportunity to explore what other systems may look at, so that at least we can get to grips of what the cost would be of looking at a different structure.
Like nationalisation?
Well, at least either that or part of it. Now, that's not something that I'm advocating for, but dare I say, others are. And wouldn't it have been interesting to properly look at what other structures could have been explored to even to keep the narrative going with properly ruling it out? Now, I absolutely fully
So you want to explore nationalisation so you can rule it out?
Well, I think there is a narrative that is building amongst opposition parties, not ourselves, because we are fully supportive of privatisation with a strong regulatory system, but a narrative that is being put forward by other parties that is looking at either that route or indeed having a shared 50-50 structure. Now, the government didn't want to, despite having campaigned for this, and know Steve Reid was previously a strong advocate of this before entering government, but it would have been a route that could have been explored by Cunliffe, even if it was to look at the figures.
But I mean, it's interesting that you'd want something explored to rule it out when it hasn't happened for the last 20, 30 years, and what has happened has failed. I mean, the privatisation model that we've had for the last 10, 15, 20 years hasn't worked.
Well, I would say that there's about £190 billion of investment that's gone in from private investment, from shareholders into the water industry. So that's the equivalent, over that period of time since about 1990, of the amount of investment that's gone into the NHS. Now, that's a huge amount of private sector investment that's gone in to make sure that water is being delivered. We have the highest rating of drinking water quality in the world. But we do know that there's been challenges around water quality, and we do know that there's been challenges around the infrastructure not being improved at the rate in which we would expect. Now, therefore, if you have a strong regulatory regime that is holding that investment vehicle to account, those water companies to account, then the model should be working in the best interests of everybody. Now, where I would advocate is there has not been the regulators carrying out their duty, using the powers that have been given to them when we were in government as strong as they should have utilised them. Now, the Cunliffe Review is detailed. It's got 88 recommendations. It's something that we will absolutely be going through with a fine-tooth comb to explore which areas we feel that we want to be absolutely strongly supporting, which is why we cautiously welcome it. But I do just say it was a missed opportunity, not for the review, if it was wanting to be as far-reaching as the government wanted it to be, to look at every single option that was on the table, rather than keeping the terms of reference more narrow-minded.
Albeit the powers that you're saying the regulators had, you only gave them in 2023, so it's not like they had a huge amount of time.
And that's when Steve Reid and myself went into the department, and we made sure that, Steve Barclay and I went into the department, and we made sure that all the key things that we wanted to focus on was bringing out tougher regulation, stronger enforcement powers for our regulators to be able to hold the polluters to account.
Yeah, I guess it's a sort of tacit acknowledgement that the privatisation model that preceded it for 13 years didn't work if those powers were needed and they came in so late. Just a quick final question, if I may. Reshuffle this week coming within the shadow cabinet?
Well, who knows? Look, all I'm generally interested in doing is, as a team, as a strong Conservative team, that we are not only holding the government to account, scrutinising the government to account, as it is our duty as the official opposition, but also making sure we're utilising this time to be developing policy that is attractive enough to be able to reinstigate that trust amongst the wider electorate that we need to be focusing on.
Are reshuffles part and parcel of normal politics, or a tacit acknowledgement that things could be going a bit better?
Well, reshuffles, as we know, happen and have happened all the time. But, crikey, we'll just have to wait and see. But what interests me is having a team approach to be able to hold the government to account and working collectively as strong and robustly as possible to ensure that we're delivering on behalf of all residents up and down the United Kingdom.
Robbie Moore, thanks so much for joining us. Good to see you, as always.